Welcome to week 2 of our Connection Group series, Active Church is Worldly. We've been looking at this idea of what it means to be worldly as a church, and even unpacking this John 3:16 verse that God so loved the world. Pastor Joe's going to share with us around the idea that this is for you and talking about confession. So we're going to turn it over to Pastor Joe as he has a great story about wrestling with his brother and what it means to experience true confession.
When I was in 7th grade and my brother was in like 4th grade, me and him got into a really intense wrestling match, as brothers typically do. I mean, really intense. It's one of those matches where we're throwing textbooks and we're hitting each other with the hardest pillows that we can find. You know, typical kind of brother things, putting holes in walls. And I hear my mom a couple times scream from the living room, "Stop!" Yeah, right. Like, that's going to stop us. So we'd stop for about 30 seconds, and then we'd get back into it, or we would try to be really quiet, you know, like, "Hey, hit me softer." Like, I don't want mom to hear, right? And so at one point, my brother grabs one of my pant belts, and he holds it up like a WWE championship belt. And I'm like, no way, it's on. So I grab the belt, and I'm thinking like I'm Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I like take it to his head, right? Like Stone Cold would do. So then my brother proceeds to cry, and as he's crying, I'm like, oh no, because he's going ballistic, like tears are coming down his face, his eyes are swelling up, like he's been a little pansy, right? And so being in 7th grade, I'm like, no, like, oh my God, what can I do? What can I do? So my brother had a really bad habit at that time of biting. I don't know why. He actually got sent home for it twice, and so I know what I'm going to do. So my mom comes in. I hear the door opening. So I bite myself as hard as I can. My mom steps in through the door, and my brother's wailing, and she looks at me, and she said, "What's going on? I told you guys to stop." And I hold out my arm, and I say, "Johnny bit me." So I took the belt to his head. My mom says, "Johnny!" My brother doesn't know what to do at this time. So my mom just walks out of the room. She storms out. My brother looks at me and he says, "You're a liar." And I said, "Well, you bit me." Fully convinced myself that he actually bit me. So I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Johnny. And if you guys are in a connection group now, this is my confession. Why is it that at such a young age, it's like we learn how to lie pretty easy? I don't know if it's like an upbringing thing or it's conditioned, but nobody ever had to teach me really how to lie. But what I do think it's kind of rooted in is I had this understanding of shame and guilt that ran really deep in my soul, where my mom coming in the room, and after her telling me over and over and over, "You need to stop wrestling your brother," I didn't want to let her down, you know? Like, I didn't want to be the one who was responsible for actually making my brother cry. I didn't want to internalize that. And if I admitted for just a second, like, yeah, okay, I took a WWE belt to my brother's head, that I would have to live with that. And it seems so minor, and it seems so little, but I think I've carried that over to a lot of things I do in my life. And this is not to say, like, hey, like I'm a liar, or I'm guilty, or I have shame about everything, but I think me and a lot of people around me and friends and family members and the people I've just been around, it's like we have this sense of wanting to protect ourselves. And I think it comes from a twisted understanding of what shame and guilt is. I think I've always grown up thinking that if I mess up, I am messed up. Wow. If I make a mistake, I am a mistake. If I do something that's wrong, I am wrong. And I internalize that. And Brene Brown, she's a social anthropologist. We love to talk about her here at Active Church. She's awesome. She talks about this tension between shame and guilt a lot in her books and in her TED Talks. And she says that we mix up the two so often that we can't differentiate them. Guilt is about an action. Shame is about an identity. Guilt is, yeah, I messed up. in this one particular thing, and shame is saying, I was born a mistake. I was born messed up. And so when it comes to something so simple as like, hurting my little brother on accident, I don't want to admit that. Like genuinely, I don't want to be a person who hurts my little brother on accident. But I think about so many other things that I do in my life, or in other ways that I've messed up. Whether that was little lies that I've told to get out of things, or whether that was even coming to know Jesus. When I think about Jesus, it's kind of difficult for me, even today sometimes, to think about how God loves me. Because I know God loves the world. We hear about it all the time. I mean, Mike talked about it last week. God loves the world. He is for the world. But does God like me? And I think that's a tension we often find ourselves in the church. It's like we know about this divine God, and he's so perfect, and he's so awesome, and maybe some people call him creator, some people call him the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. He is the one which time knocks around in, and he is this good God, and he loves all of the world. But when I think about my individual life and some of the things I've done, or some of the places I've gone, or some of the experiences I've had, I'm like, can he really like me? Like, I know my mom loves me, but I know sometimes she doesn't like me very much. I know God loves me, but does he like me? Does he think about me? Does he want to know me more intimately? Going back to this whole shame and guilt thing, Brené Brown also says that shame is highly correlated to things such as addiction, abuse, violence, aggression, eating disorders, social interaction flaws. But she also says that a healthy understanding of guilt is inversely correlated to these things. Meaning that when we identify with the things that we do wrong, we begin to act on them. We begin to, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. We begin to think we are these things, and so we act according to these things. Because I'm a mistake, I fall into this cycle of depression. Because I am wrong, because I lie, and I was just born in lies, I begin to fall into this ugly cycle of thinking that's who I am, and so I'm going to act on these things. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way. But when we have a healthy understanding of guilt, we're able to have space to say, yeah, I did that, but that's not me. Yeah, I did that, but that's not who I am. And so when it comes to our relationship with God, and we're wrestling through, man, does God love me and like me? Does God love the world and like me individually? I think Jesus knew we were going to have this tension where we were going to wrestle with, like, yeah, I know he loves the world, but I'm not perfect. So can he really like me individually in my day-to-day life as I'm walking with Jesus, as I call myself a Christian and I'm still messing up? Can God still smile at me? Can God still be interested in knowing me? And Jesus was like, yeah, I can. And so God says, hey, I'm going to send my son Jesus, and this Jesus is going to live this life that is going to give us a picture, a window into the heart of God. And as he's living this life, he tells these beautiful stories. And I love these stories, and a lot of us have maybe heard them over and over and over again, but I just want us to pause and really just sit on the power of these stories. In Luke chapter 15, he tells this trilogy of lostness, right? And this lostness has to do with a lost sheep, a lost coin, and a lost son. What happens is a shepherd loses one sheep. He has 100 sheep, and he loses one of them. And so what does he do? Any of us, right? We party with the 99 and say, sorry, get out of here. All right? No, he takes off. He leaves the 99 to kind of fend for themselves, look after each other, and he goes and looks for the one. And then when he finds the one, he comes back and calls all his friends and rejoices. Or this woman who has 10 coins and loses one coin. She flips over her entire house, and when she finds the one, she throws a party, right? That's good money management, right? That's some Dave Ramsey stuff right there. Or we get to this story where there's a son, and he leaves his father, and he says, Dad, I want my part of the inheritance. And he leaves and he goes and he spends all of his dad's money. And he blows it all in living a wild life, living lavishly. Then he realizes, man, I am dead broke and I am not in a fun place right now. He finds himself wishing to eat the pods of the pigs because he is just so hungry after balling out and spending all this money. So he thinks, man, I can go home. Like, my dad has money. My dad's still balling out of control. Like, let me just go home. And so he goes home, and in his head, he's rehearsing. Dad, I'm sorry. I screwed up. I messed up. Like, I feel this shame. I identify with it. I can be a servant. I can eat with the servants. I'll be a slave to my dad. Like, everything's rehearsed. And as he's approached, you can imagine him thinking, like, I have to do this. I have to admit I'm guilty. I feel the shame. I feel horrible already. And as he gets close to the house, this is what happens in Luke chapter 15, verse 21. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found. So they began to celebrate. In God's economy, shame and guilt almost don't make sense. It's almost like it's reversed all on its head. And what God really wants us to know, is that he is deeply in love with you. Flaws and all. He wants to know you. He wants to know your story. He's invested in you. I would even say he has a picture of you in his wallet. Because he loves you. Every flaw and all. And he says, hey, the shame thing, I don't want you to identify with those things you're doing wrong. Actually, I want to handle all those things, and I want to breathe real life into you. I want to speak words like love and mercy and joy and peace. Those are the things I want you to identify with. And that whole guilt thing, let me take care of that. And that's what he did. And going to the cross, he said, there's been some mess ups, there's been some hiccups, but I want you to know you're free from those things. And though you are guilty, I love you. And though you are guilty, I want you to know you are mine. And that's the God who I know. And that's the God who I love. This Jesus, he's for me. He's not for the perfect. He's not for the beautiful. He's not for the put together. He's for me. And he's for you. He's for us. This Jesus is for the world.